How's it going, folks? Jack here with another reaction. So Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree is but 20 days away, and it is beyond hype when this thing is going to come out. I will be streaming it and a bunch of others will certainly be doing the same, but for those who would mind, definitely join me on the 24th. There was a preview event for the DLC recently that a bunch of content creators attended. I got to see some pictures of it. It took place in like a graveyard with a wonderful venue. FromSoft, you know what you do. But simultaneously, they have all been releasing some videos covering this DLC. And I will be watching the one here from VaatiVidya. And mostly because, much like his Armored Core video, I would imagine that he have taken a bunch of notes and perhaps made some recreations of stuff that we might not have seen from others. Not saying that they are doing a bad job presenting theirs, he just does it somewhat better sometimes. That being said, naturally, this implies that the video will be containing spoilers. So if you want to experience the DLC like with completely novel eyes and nothing spoiled for you, please stop watching right now. Or perhaps, if we are lucky enough, do we have a timestamp here? Everything I discovered. Perhaps we might have a timestamp here that shows when he's going to stop, so perhaps stick around for a little bit. But personally, because I've been so involved in the lore recently, from watching other content creators to lingering in the subreddit, I don't have that much of an issue with getting some spoilers. That said, we have a video of his here where he played 3 hours of the DLC. Let's watch.
After you interact with Miquella's cocoon, you're transported here to a small cave that opens up to a view of this, what they're calling the Erdtree.
Ooh.
And underneath this is an open plain. It's called the Spirit Grave Plains, and it's pretty huge. We had 3 hours with the game, but I only had time to explore a fraction of this.
Our direction
We were
is
told
wild.
that there were 2 legacy dungeons in this area, so finding those became my first objective.
I'm gonna praise that art direction every single time I get to see it. Like the fact that the draw distances can show you almost, well, blurry, but you can see some details on the Wicker Man there in the distance. That's amazing.
I managed to beat both of the end bosses of those legacy dungeons, and I also took down a ton of notes, so I have a lot to share with you guys today. This isn't my footage, but I did the exact same thing this character is doing now, which is to go right towards the Wicker Man in the distance.
Big boy. Oh, wow.
The map of this area says that the entire expanse is marred by the harrowing ravages of war, and this guy is obviously one of the vestiges of that war. We know from previous trailers that these fought on Messmer's side during his attempt to purge the Land of Shadow.
Yeah, and given that they're sustained by the corpses, they want to feed you to the fire. And did you notice how quickly the aggro was for this? So like from the distance, they're not just like the walking mausoleums there that will carpet bomb you because you attack them. No, these ones actually will hurt you intentionally.
You know how everyone fights the Erdtree Sentinel as soon as they first start Elden Ring? This is a lot like that. This boss takes like no damage, and I think you'd probably be better off fighting him later on. So that's what I did. I bravely ran away towards this area that you see ahead of me. This is a crossroads.
Strategic retreat.
Between Castle Ensis on the right and Bellarat Tower Settlement on the left. Little did I know though, the fire giant was still aggroed onto me this entire time, so he came up behind me and killed me while I was talking to these 2 NPCs.
Oh.
Fie, another, treading the heels of Miquella. Then, as that woman would surely say, we are in our purposes well aligned, but understand, your kind are not forgiven. The Erdtree is my people's enemy, by Marika long betrayed, set aflame. I believe Miquella's apologies when he says our delivery will come. but never will I see your kind as worthy.
Kind Mikola.
Okay, so that character you just heard talking, his dialogue cuts off there in this footage. However, while I wasn't able to record footage at the event, luckily I can type as fast as NPCs can talk. So here's the dialogue you just heard, and here's the other dialogue he spoke that I wrote down.
And yet my oath I cannot overlook. If Mikola who you would seek, then comrade, allow me to give you this. These are the size of the crosses I found. Crosses? I urge you to follow after Mikola. As long as you abide by his footfalls, you will be no enemy to me. Wow. The dedication to the kind Mikola, huh? Really trying to make amends for his mum's misdeed.
I transcribed all of the dialogue from all 8 NPCs that I met, but this might be considered spoilers to a lot of people, so I'll only share it later in the video. By the way, this is the entrance to Bewar, the Tower Settlement. This was the first legacy dungeon I explored. And this is where we get to talk about the new weapons. These weapons were a highlight of the DLC. You find so many incredible ones really early on. As a reminder, there are 8 new weapon categories being introduced in the DLC, and here you can see the character has a new throwing weapon equipped and some new magic.
Ooh.
Now the character switches weapons to equip the Dryleaf Arts, a new type of hand-to-hand combat.
Let's go. Oh, poise build.
So yeah, we're getting 8 new weapon types, but before today we only knew the names of 5 of these new weapon types.
Yeah,
but
so
now all 8 have been revealed. The last 3 weapon types are perfume bottles, light greatswords, and beast claws. You're about...
That's great. That is so great. Okay, look, in one of my playthroughs, I was trying to like literally lamp as a perfumer because I thought the aesthetics to be so cool. Perhaps in some of the footage that I've shown you of my reaction to VaatiVidya when I like splice some of my gameplay footage. I have a ton, like I have over 500 gigabytes worth of saves that I just recorded through Shadowplay. Like a lot of it feature one of my characters wearing a perfumer build. And oh my god, this is going to be awesome.
About to see the beast claws.
Beast claw. Oh! Horaloo!
Even with these new
nice.
weapons, this rooftop section was difficult. I actually got knocked off by these birds and I fell down here to a sort of sewer filled with these fly creatures that you can see off to the left. I have some lore to share on these, and I think it relates to them. One of the talismans I found was called the Ailment Talisman, and it reads, "When the weak were infected with the dreaded fly sickness, they perished well before the metamorphosis could take hold. Oddly, those who cared for the infected and made sure they were given a proper burial were never afflicted themselves."
Oh. Oh, literally
Also,
turning into the
this is
fly.
where you get to see one of the new perfumer weapons. By the way, again, the place we're exploring is called Bewar Tower Settlement. From a distance you can see this enormous tower coming out from the settlement, and clearly the settlement was built around it. So what is this tower? Well, I found an item in this area called the Bone Bow, which imbues arrows with vengeful spirits, and it explains how the tower was once a place for ancient hexing arts. Maybe that explains why we're fighting so many spirits in this area. But I think this tower is hiding a huge secret, because in front of the tower I found a note that explains where this tower leads. Apparently,
I just had a massive urge to start gold blooming and saying stuff like life finds a way because of the fly. The movie they made. I'm gonna stop.
It leads to the Gate of Divinity, which I think could explain the very nature of the lands between, as well as everything we saw with Marika in the previous trailer.
Oh.
So the tower is our objective, but to get there first we have to defeat the divine beast that guards it.
The dancer. As we can hear, the screams are artificial, obviously because it's being controlled by 3 individuals.
This is the divine beast, Dancing Lion, and it's tough. They said this was the easier boss of the two, but I disagree. I had a way harder time with this one, and it took me 3 or 4 attempts to defeat.
Ooh. New art.
Briefly here, we see the player use a new weapon, a thrusting shield, but there are some attacks you can't block against. The remembrance of the Dancing Lion tells us that when the Impaler's army assailed the tower, the ritual of the lion dance was turned towards martial ends, its divinity, its fury, its light-footed beauty. And according to a charm I found, divine beasts are messengers of the heavens, and their rage mirrors the tumult of the skies, of which storms are the pinnacle.
Oh yeah, definitely.
After defeating the divine beast, I went across that bridge in the distance, and I cleared the second legacy dungeon, which is called Castle Ensis. There's no footage I can show of that, but afterwards I did actually come here and I noticed these guys fighting. This player is about to show off the new reverse hand swords, and also this new multi-shot crossbow.
Well, damn. I'm always amazed by the rigging work done, and of course also the animation in Souls-like games. Like, I was flabbergasted by last year's entry through Lives of P, which did a phenomenal job at introducing us to new stuff. I tried with Lord of the Fallen, didn't quite live up to the expectations I had about that one, but it pains me to see what was depicted there with the dancer, like the amount of work that had to be put in motion there. Like, do these people take breaks? I hope they do. Can you parry with them? Oh. To a certain extent you can.
So this player is about to make their way into a nearby dungeon. Now, I only had time to clear 2 overworld dungeons, but the 2 I did find were extremely unique. You can tell that they put a lot of effort into the dungeon designs, that I found at least. And luckily, this player is going into one of the dungeons that I actually found. It's called the Ruined Lava Forge Intake. You might recognize it from a previous trailer. It's this one, with the long intake pipe you can use as a bridge. That phantom right there says, "By grace, if I ever see another rock, I shall find it, of this I have no doubt. The altar of the forge cannot be far." The altar of the forge he's looking for is at the end of the dungeon. It's this thing, from this screenshot. Interestingly, there's no boss in this dungeon that I could find, but instead I looted the anvil hammer, one of the treasures of the ruined forges.
Huh.
This next clip shows off the last new weapon category we haven't yet seen, the Light Greatsword class. This Light Greatsword in particular is called Milady.
Ooh. Every Fate fan is going to rejoice with this one.
These new weapons are really something. I guess light greatswords basically then are weapons with the length of a greatsword, but with an elegant moveset that makes use of how light the weapon is. Okay, so weirdly, this clip and all of the remaining footage that I have to show you is of places that I'm almost certain we couldn't access in our preview build of the game. I think these places exist if you progress past the second legacy dungeon in this starting area, but they were watching very carefully to make sure we didn't do that. I don't think we could get to these places, but regardless, this is probably a good point for us to transition into what will be the second part of this video, where from this point on, I'm going to go into extreme detail on everything I experienced, even stuff that I can't show. So that means every item description, every NPC I met, and I'm also going to talk about what's actually inside that second legacy dungeon, which is called Castle Ensis. Honestly, I'd only really recommend watching this point onwards if you're extremely lore hungry and you just really want to know everything you can about the story before you play. So pause the video, think about whether this is for you, because my goal on this channel is to enhance your enjoyment of these games, and if you think going in blind or blinder would enhance your experience, please do that. With that said, let's start at the very beginning, at Miquella's cocoon.
Alright. Spoilers is right now. Let's go.
You first arrive at Mogwin Palace to enter the DLC. Someone is already there before you. Her name is Leda, the Needle Knight. I won't narrate all her dialogue, but this is what I've transcribed, so feel free to pause the video and read all of that.
Alright, so I'm Aiden doing the work here. Were you guided here by kindly Miquella? I am Leda, and like you, I was guided by faith along his honorable path. Touch the withered arm, and you too will be transported to the realm of shadows where Miquella the Kind now dwells. My compatriots are there already. Like us, they have heard kindly Miquella's call. They are certain to lend you aid. Come now.
Touch the withered arm and travel to the realm of shadow. I will not be far behind. May we meet again.
Oh yes, that's the last quote that she said in the trailer, the gameplay trailer.
Basically, she's the character who has talked a few times already in previous trailers, and you might have seen her recently in this incredible concept art that they put out.
Ooh.
Basically, Leda is the de facto leader of Miquella's band of faithful followers that seem to be tracking him throughout the DLC. Now, you touch Miquella's cocoon, and you're instantly transported to this cave. There was no cutscene for us, but I wonder if that's because maybe they already activated the cutscene when they were setting up this build for us to play. Regardless, you head out into this plain that's full of graves and what's called spirit grave grass. The Skadu tree looks over it all, and we know the name of this tree from a Shadow Realm rune, which is basically just a consumable rune that says the Skadu tree is the shadow of the Erdtree. No wonder Grace shines ever so brilliantly. So apparently golden remnants of grace are still bestowed upon those who fall in the realm of shadow. And there's another item that talks about it. It's a Skadu tree fragment, which says, it is said that when the Skadu tree crumbles from its core, that it will scatter across the entire realm of shadow. The people of the Erdtree collect the splinters and use them in prayer.
Holy shit, I would have been lost playing through this for 3 hours, just trying to experiment through different builds and stuff. But this man was just noting everything.
The icon for the Skadu tree fragment looked just like that black burnt Erdtree, but with the golden sort of syrup inside. And these fragments were important because these are the fragments that give you a bit of a damage boost or a damage reduction exclusively when you're within the Shadow Realm, and I think they're meant to really motivate you to explore the open world, because I found the vast majority of these in the open world. I didn't find any, I don't think, in a legacy dungeon, so they're really meant to motivate your exploration. Another item that's similar to these that you also hand in at a site of grace are revered spirit ashes. Now, these are an item that when handed in bolster both your summoned spirits and Torrent's ability to deal and negate damage. Obviously in Torrent's case it just reduces the damage you take. But again, these have no influence outside the Land of Shadow. And speaking of summoned spirits, I found 3 in the DLC, and each of them had really good lore associated with them. The ash I used the most were the Finger Creeper ashes. Finally, we get lore on the Finger Creepers. I used this in my Lion Dancer fight. It actually came in really clutch because I was about to die, but then the Finger Creeper used an AoE heal and got me through the fight, and I think that's the fight I ended up winning on. The other Spirit Ash that I think was the strongest was called Andreas Black Knight Commander, and here's the description for that one. I think, if you pause and read that description, I think that might be the most lore-significant description that I wrote down out of my entire play session.
Okay, Andreas Black Knight Commander Spirit's Ashes. The Black Knights were the primary force of Messmer's army. Their first leader was Andrea, a man endowed with great strength and command over the powers of the Crucible. Okay, now that got some implication with it, and whose spirit in these ashes dwells, though he remained a devout follower of Messmer. After his flight from the Erdtree, he would rebel after learning of his liege serpentine nature. His righteous stand was rewarded with imprisonment in an underground tomb. Ooh, Impaler's Okay, I might need to investigate that place again, just to make sure. But yes, this confirmed a lot of the speculation that we had on him. The serpentine nature of Messmer that would have caused a certain degree of dismay amongst his followers.
I will just say it's very interesting that it says Messmer fled from the Erdtree. Did he assault or burn the Erdtree, maybe? The summon is very strong, it uses a lot of FP, and it looks obviously just like the Black Knight commanders that I'm showing in these screenshots. The third and final Spirit Ash I found were the Gravebird Spirit Ashes.
You saw it in the fight.
Now, the Gravebirds are this enemy that you can see in the footage. There were also a lot of them sort of sitting on top of trees to the left here in this scene. You can't see them, but they were guarding a small mausoleum here. And inside this mausoleum, there was a fairly difficult NPC boss that uses the crossbow. He's basically this NPC that we saw in a previous trailer, except in phantom form. He didn't drop the crossbow when I defeated him, but he did drop his greatsword and his armor, which describes him as a knight of the solitary jail.
I want to say that this might be the closest thing that we might get to an official Berserk look without being compromised with the whole copyright issues, as was with Dragon's Dogma as an example. But what does he say here? Beckoned with a black cloak, features overlapping plates of steel. The nameless mausoleums of the realm of shadows are said to hold the spirits of warriors who lost their name, or their hearts. A steel greatsword wielded by the Knights of the Solitary Goal. Through a secret rite, they relinquished their heart for heightened battle prowess. Next, they engraved their blade with 2 crests, one depicting the light of birth and the other solitude.
Next, the biggest revelation in the DLC, bar none, is that the worms, I can confirm, are friendly, until they're not. If you hit them, well, you'll see. Anyway, when you first enter the DLC, you know, which direction you set off in is such a defining moment, but I think most people will eventually find their way to these crosses of Miquella.
Danger Noodle confirmed.
That have been left behind, partly because it's very close to the Fire Giant, which I think also draws your attention, but also these crosses just stand out from such a distance, and I think that is their purpose. They don't actually do anything except give you some lore. When you touch the cross, it says carved words coalesce, and the words at most of them said something like, I abandon here the first of the flesh of my body. Clearly these are left behind by Miquella, and clearly his whole entourage are following these crosses as well, so you often find NPCs here. This NPC at the back there is named Freya. Basically, she used to be one of Radahn's followers, but now she follows Miquella instead, and she recommends that you talk to who she calls her dour little friend. And if you talk to him, he does give you a map of the cross's whereabouts, which is basically like a little hand-drawn map that tells you about 3 nearby crosses that are, and I quote, Miquella's footprints. So that's Freya. But the man you talk to for the map, I think, is called Hornsent, but I'm not sure if that's his name or if Hornsent are just a race of beings instead.
Yeah.
Later, we learn that the Lion Dancer is essentially sent from the heavens, and since it has horns, I speculate that the horned race that once occupied Ballarat Tower Settlement might be called the Hornsent. The word is actually referenced as well in some items I found in the Tower Settlement.
So, is this a new revelation about the origin of the Crucible itself? As we just imagined that people who had horns were just the original, at least the natives of the lands between. Or what have they done? It's all intriguing, but
these tender items in particular seem to make it clear that the Hornsent were once a part of this society's upper echelons. But then his people were betrayed by Marika and set aflame. This explains why this Hornsent man is so upset with us, since we're a tarnished who has had Marika's grace of gold restored to them. And maybe I should have mentioned this earlier, but I guess his face is actually made up of horns. I thought they were worms at first. Before you enter Ballarat Tower Settlement, there's a small camp off to the left here that you can't see, and it features 2 more members of Miquella's faithful followers.
hopefully it's not one of those cases like Moog, where like the horns literally protruded inside the face. I don't even want to think about that because that would be extremely painful. But yeah, we've seen examples of that before, but not to that degree.
Their names are Ansbach and Moore, and luckily we've got pictures of them from previous trailers. Let's talk about Moore first. He's a bit of a gentle giant, and he sells things. Things, he says, bring joy to all. I'll list a couple of the more interesting descriptions from items he sold on screen. Notably, there was knot resin and a sealed spirit spring note. The other NPC here, and I might be butchering their name, but their name was Ansbach. He's a man who's put his fighting days behind him, and now instead he dedicates himself to discerning Miquella's true purpose in the Land of Shadow.
So basically a Gideon Hofnir that isn't too pompous.
It's an important reveal because it reveals that those who follow Miquella do so out of faith. They probably can't claim to know his true motives. It seems you can progress Ansbach's questline by discovering more of Miquella's crosses, and apparently there are 6 total in this area. Curiously, Ansbach was once in service to Lord Moog. I wonder if he abandoned Moog at some point when he realized what was being done to Miquella. And this brings up another important question, which is that I wonder, is Miquella affected by what Moog has done to his body in the Lands Between? And we might have a bit of an answer taking shape here, because there's what looks like a sort of plant growing in the Land of Shadow called the Empyrean Blood Burgeon. It looks a lot like the sacramental buds that grow in the Lands Between. And like the sacramental buds, it has a description that seems to relate to Miquella's blood, and it reads, Empyrean Blood Burgeon, said to burgeon forth from where the golden blood of Miquella, the wounded Empyrean, pooled. So another of Miquella's titles is the Wounded Empyrean, and I wonder if these wounds came at the hands of Moog.
I think
Anyway,
so.
after entering Ballarat, I looted a black firefly inside, which is a butterfly item similar to the other ones in Elden Ring, and where those butterflies are clearly referring to other demigods, this black firefly is
flame.
clearly a reference to Mesmer. As seen in the trailers, this tower settlement is the place that was heavily assaulted by Mesmer's forces. Ash is found piled up all throughout the city, very similar to how it is in Lane Dell. Clearly this place has been burned before, as you saw in the trailer. I also found some left behind Mesmer Fire grease, which is a type of weapon buff, and it explains how fire was a symbol of Mesmer's crusade. Most of the enemies in the city are spirits, but there is also a red phantom who gloats about how Mesmer is going to kill everyone, and he taunts us as he attacks us. But there are a few horned enemies left in the city. One of them is this enemy, which we have concept art for.
Yeah.
It's quite small in-game, it's about the same size as your character, but unfortunately I didn't get any lore on this enemy. The other horned enemies are these horned knights, who are extremely difficult. They essentially never stop attacking, and they seem to have infinite poise, making them this near constant threat.
Ouch.
So clearly there is a presence of the horned faction in this city, even after being burned by Mesmer. Around this time, I checked which talismans my character was wearing, and one of them was the Outer God's Heirloom, and it references a clan who lost everything in the Great Fires. I'll let you read for yourself how intriguing this description is.
Engraved with the lore of an outer god, Razes Arcane, the clan who lost everything in the Great Fires, peered upon the corpses of their ancestors, normally an act of sanctity, and saw in its shadow a twisted deity. The clan had suffered such torment that the horrible thing was taken as an object of worship. Oh, yeah, we've seen some of that in the Let's Between before, but let's not point back to Shabriri, one of the most disturbing characters in the lore so far. If we have its outer god still affecting things in the Land of Shadow, then wow.
These items are all hinting at a truth that we can only really guess at so early on. Another huge description was from this sorcery, which I believe you can see here in this footage, and this one seems to hint at the sorcerous origins of the fingers. Another thing you can find in Ballarat before the Lion Dancer is an old woman, who you eventually realize is a character who is speaking in the Lion Dancer cutscene, rousing the lion to life with this impassioned speech. Here's her dialogue. According to an item I found, I don't remember its name, but we learn from this item that this old woman is called the Empyrean Grandam. I think Grandam kind of means like a shaman or a grandma kind of figure, and Grandam kind of means like a shaman or a grandma kind of figure, and she says that she wants to take vengeance upon Mesmer and his lot.
Yeah, the Strumpet's vile progeny. And yes, saying Strumpet is obviously a reference to America. And the words that were echoed in the beginning of the cinematic trailer there with the act that was committed.
The seduction and the betrayal. An affair from which gold arose.
And the word strumpet, of course, refers to a sexual act. So, who is Mesmer's father? That's a good question, because we might be thinking about Radagon a lot, but I'm not sure.
Now, the old woman doesn't talk to you after you kill the lion. She's basically depressed that you've killed her keeper. However, there is a way to get more dialogue out of her, and the guy next to me, Jeremy Ray, a journalist and a friend, he figured it out and he has the dialogue, so if you're interested, please talk to him about it, because I don't quite want to spoil that yet.
Okay.
After I defeated the bosses at the end of both Legacy dungeons, I went back to the Round Table Hold and handed in their remembrances. The Remembrance of the Dancing Lion grants us a new Frost Stomp Ash of War, or alternatively, you can hand it in for a charm that I think summons a sort of apparition from above you that chases enemies, though I'm not too sure about that one. After the fight with the divine beast, you ascend the tower of Belorat, and the view up here is incredible, but all you can really do here is look around because shadowy thorns block the way forward into the tower. And there's a note here that's been left behind by Needle Knight later, and it reads, "The gate of divinity lies in the tower sealed by shadow. This is surely where kind Mikola is headed. We are no Empyreans, but we must locate the path that will lead us there. I will follow the crosses east." This item description also potentially contains another huge revelation, as it mentions a gate of divinity in the same paragraph that also mentions Empyreans. If I had to guess, this might be the gate of divinity that represents an ascent into godhood, and that's where Leda thinks Mikola is headed, because he is an Empyrean looking to become a god, you'd think. So we can't go this way, but obviously the way we have to go is east, and that's the way I went next, to Castle Ensis, the second legacy dungeon we could experience, for which I have no footage to show you.
Sure.
For this second legacy dungeon, I switched characters. So previously I was playing a sorcerer build that I had respec'd into a dex build that could make use of a great katana that I was wielding, and that's what I defeated the divine beast with. However, when I respec'd as the knight, I found my favorite weapon so far. It's called the Smith Script Hammer. It's a great hammer, but it has throwing attacks. If you do a charged R2 or a jumping R2 or a running R2, you'll spin and just yeet the entire hammer at enemies in the distance, dealing a ton of damage if you actually hit with it. It's incredible. It feels so good. I also love that they...
But do you have to go and pick it up again, or does it fly back like Captain America's shield or Thor's hammer?
Giving special treatment to these older weapon categories and giving some of these weapons ranged attacks as well. Quality builds are going to be eating really good in this DLC, I think. This hammer carried me through all of Castle Ensis. Castle Ensis is essentially like a carrion stronghold. It's filled with moon knights and magical enemies. The entrance to it has a cross of Mikola, and at its base is another letter from Leda, proof that indeed she did come here next. How you get inside this castle is really cool. So the main gate is closed, so you have to pick a path across a waterfall to the side and infiltrate this watery secret pathway to get inside. Once you're there, there are all these teleporting nobles casting glintstone pebble at you from the rooftops as you progress through the city. It was a fantastic experience pushing through this place. It was a lot of fun. The boss of this legacy dungeon is named, and you're going to think I'm trolling, but her name is Rolana.
Really? Rolana? Renala? Are they siblings? But you know what, it's not even that surprising when we have Melania, Melisent, and Marika in the same kind of family line. All we need is, of course, melatonin to have the entire group with us.
Not Renala, Rolana. She's the younger sister of Renala, and she renounced her heritage to chase after Mesmer. She wields these twinned swords. She's a lot like Pontiff Sullivan from Dark Souls 3. One of her swords is imbued with black fire, and the other one is imbued with magic. I managed to beat her on my second try. The great hammer I was using was OP again, and when I handed in her remembrances, you could choose from either her twinned swords, or you could get her twin moon sorcery. I love the line of this description that says, "Here and here alone were moon and fire, ever together." It's a neat reference to the Sword of Night and Flame, which has links to the Carrions as well. So in the end, she stayed in the Land of Shadow, becoming the Sword of Mesmer. All her items are fascinating, and I can't wait to learn more about her lore.
What is up with carrions, man? Being just... Oh my god. You're chasing after the wrong guys. They're gonna leave you behind and turn you into... baby mamas. Is that... No, that's not the right word that I'm trying to use here. Well, at least this one did not divorce her.
In this area, I also found Rilana's cameo, which is a new talisman that increases the damage done by stance weapons. Any weapon that requires you to enter a stance will have its damage increased. This would be great with the Milady, obviously, and there's probably a cool build you could do with the Milady where you make use of its amazing guard counter. And speaking of guard counters, another thing that will make guard counters amazing in Elden Ring is a new crystal tier for your wondrous physic flask. This new crystal tier, if I understand it right, unlocks a perfect block mechanic in Elden Ring, whereby you probably take no stamina damage if you time your block perfectly with an enemy's attacks. You guys probably know that I'm a huge fan of Sekiro's parry system, and I always thought it was a huge missed opportunity that Elden Ring didn't incorporate this system in some way, but now it seems they are bringing it over with this crystal tier, at least. There were two other NPCs I met in the DLC. One was named Tholier, and he was a really demure man who had an obsession with poison. He sold the deadly poison perfume bottle as well as some other weapons besides. The other NPC I met was named Egon, and you could hear him screaming in pain from a great distance. But even then he was swearing revenge upon some dragon that had wronged him. So I put Egon out of his misery, of course, and as I did, he fought back with some Dragon Communion spells. This clued me in that he might be a Dragon Communion warrior, and a lot of the items he dropped when I killed him confirmed that. I had to do it for the lore. You guys understand.
Right.
But the truly fascinating thing is that there's an invader that attacks you just up the path from Egon. And they invade you, but they don't look like a regular human invader. So it looks like we're getting a new humanoid dragon form. Every From Software game's gotta have one, it seems.
Yeah.
As far as the lore goes, there's probably only two more extremely important things to discuss. I didn't fight this enemy, but I heard from someone else in the room that there was a boss called Godwin's Loyal Knight. This boss gave you its axes upon defeat, which apparently were really cool. They apparently let you teleport around while you're attacking with them. But apparently, these axes were called Death Knight's twin axes, which seems to be a pretty big hint that Godwin has knights that serve him after his death, which could imply that the Prince of Death is a force in this world, even now, which is a pretty big revelation. Another thing I heard about is an item called Marika's Blessing. This is an item similar to the Divine Blessing from Dark Souls, which restores all of your HP and FP. Apparently it's an item that has a description that says something like, Marika gave this to Miquella to take on his journey. She only made one of them. And this is another big revelation, because Miquella's journey to the Land of Shadow is not something that I thought would be sanctioned by Marika. It also makes me think about this item description from the base game where Miquella says he has learned to compel affection. I wonder if he could have learned that from his mother? But I'm getting deep into speculation territory now, and I'm also getting these two item descriptions secondhand, so take what I've just said with a grain of salt.
There are some things that often feel contradictory to Marika's behavior, as if she at times is working against her own plans or against the plans of the greater will. I'm not quite sure what her endgame is. Perhaps she committed into something that she now regrets, but she's way too deep into it to the point where she... But I mean, we kill her. So, what then?
But that's pretty much it from me. I'm going to leave you with a list of all the rest of the item descriptions that I transcribed while I was at the event. And if you're in the camp that doesn't care about spoilers, then I hope you get a lot out of these. Of course, if you're a creator who wants to use some of these item descriptions or footage from my video to make some speculation content, of course, go for it. Of course, thank you for watching as well, and this will probably be my last DLC video until the game comes out, so I'm looking forward to that, and I'll see you in the next one.
Wow. Holy shit. Oh, this is looking fantastic, man. There's so much good stuff in there. I can now make an Eddie Gordo build for my Elden Ring character. With the new hand-to-hand combat that we can leave in the game, it's basically capoeira. Well, at least it depends on the implication that it brings forth, right? As it is depicted kind of like that. It was a whole dance that was used for people, at least enslaved people, to be able to rebel. So, and do that in secrecy. That's going to be awesome. But guys, thank you so much for watching. Of course, do make sure to go and subscribe to Vaati if you haven't already. And of course, thank him so much for allowing us to react to this one. And of course, if you like this reaction, don't forget to hit that like button. Wish you all have a wonderful day. Bye.